North of the Yangtze River, Changjiang, much of China was once covered by primeval deciduous forest, most of which has been removed to create farmland. South of the Yangtze, the true Chinese forest was prevalent before 1800. A wild growth of trees and shrubs survives, however, throughout the cultivated areas, and park-like tree growth and stands of bamboo are widespread. The original forest cover included 60 different genera of tall trees, among the temperate genera were oak, maple, linden, chestnut, hornbeam, and a species of hickory, and among the tropical genera were magnolia, the tulip tree, the camphor tree, the Spanish cedar, sweet gum, catalpa, and lianas, vines. A variety of conifers of both hemispheres also occurred there, and in the mountains of eastern Sichuan there grew a rare and ancient Chinese conifer, the dawn redwood, Metasequoia glyptostroboite. Palm trees are found throughout South China and southern South Korea, as well as in the southern parts of Japan. Many varieties of bamboo also are found in those regions. South and Southeast Asia. The wettest parts of peninsular India, such as the Western Ghats, and of Southeast Asia have magnificent tropical forests noteworthy for the variety of their plant life. A significant feature of South Asian vegetation is the family Dipterocaripaceae, yielding aromatic oils and resins, which is represented there by more than 500 species. In parts of peninsular India and Southeast Asia that have a seasonal monsoon climate, with 4 to 8 dry months per year, moist and dry deciduous forests thrive. Many of the tree species, such as teak, sal, and sandalwood, are highly valuable and are heavily exploited. In areas with a prolonged dry season and less precipitation, for example, northwestern India, the interior of the Deccan Plateau, and the dry zone of Myanmar, Burma, savanna woodland and thorny thickets of acacias and euphorbias are the predominant natural vegetation. In all of the major climate zones of South and Southeast Asia, and particularly on the alluvial plains, much of the natural vegetation has been cleared to make way for agriculture. Mangrove swamps thrive in the sheltered muddy coasts and deltas. Their outermost edges are represented by species of Rhizophora, red mangrove, followed by those of Bruguiera and Avicia, white mangrove. The bogs on the landward edges of those swamps abound with the semi-aquatic nipa palm. West Asia. In West Asia, naturally wild vegetation no longer occurs in clearly defined zones but is dispersed in small areas. The region is predominantly arid, desert-like depressions such as the Kizilkan Desert of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, the Karakum Desert of Turkmenistan, and the Rub al-Khali, empty quarter, of the Arabian Peninsula contrast with the moist, forested mountains that lie between them. 3 climatic zones, however, characterize West Asia: a continental climate in the northern regions, a dry zone, except where northerly winds bring moisture to the mountains, to the south, and a Mediterranean climate along the western edges. Vegetation and society. Vegetation and traditional civilization. Asia's indigenous vegetation has provided many of the world's food crops, including most of the cereal grains, oil seeds, fruits, and vegetables, and its lands provided one of the great cradles of agriculture. 3 primary centers for the domestication of those plants have been postulated. One was in the southwest, consisting of sites in the Levant and northern Syria, southeastern Anatolia, Transcaucasia, and the Zagros Mountains. Wild strains of wheat, barley, certain legumes, cherry and peach trees, and grapevines were domesticated in those regions. The second center was in the south and east, northeastern India, peninsular Southeast Asia, the Sunda Islands of Indonesia, and southern China, where rice, root crops such as taro and yams, and fruit trees such as bananas and mangoes were domesticated. The third center was in northern China and adjacent regions, where foxtail millet, soybeans, and hemp were first cultivated. Human impact on natural landscapes. Agriculture. Both rain-fed and irrigated, livestock raising, and forestry have transformed Asian ecosystems. 3 areas have undergone the greatest modification by agriculture: the broad band of predominantly wheat, corn, maize, and barley cultivation across southern Siberia and northern Kazakhstan, a large belt of wheat, corn, millet, and soybean cultivation across northern China, and the monsoonal zone of rice cultivation that stretches from India through Southeast Asia and South China to the Korean Peninsula and Japan. Agricultural landscapes predominate in those regions, and natural vegetation is confined to rugged terrain. The impact of human activity in the arid regions is intensive in the irrigated areas of Mesopotamia, Middle Asia, the Indus River Valley, and scattered oases. Pastoral activities have had a major impact on the vast belt of Asian steppes and deserts from the Arabian Peninsula to the Gobi and on the scrublands and former woodlands of the Asian Mediterranean region. Animal life. The Himalayas, stretching from east to west, form a barrier that largely prevents the movement of fauna southward or northward. Thus, Asia north of the Himalayas, with parts of Western Asia and most of East Asia, belongs to the Palearctic, Old World, subregion of the Holarctic zoogeographic region, roughly, the northern hemisphere north of the tropics. Asia south of the Himalayas is called the Oriental, or Indian, region. The boundary dividing those zones east and west of the Himalayas is not well marked. However, as the mountain chains there often have a north-south trend facilitating migration of animals between them. The taiga. The taiga fauna is much richer than that of the tundra. The taiga is the haunt of brown bears, wolves and foxes, gluttons, a kind of wolverine, otters, ermines, sables, lynx, elk, forest reindeer, hares, and several kinds of squirrels. Birds include species of grouse and woodpeckers and pine grosbeaks, crossbills, siskins, redpolls, red-spotted blue-throats, or ruby-throats, redwings, fieldfares, medium-sized thrushes, nutcrackers, and Siberian jays. Wading birds include T-rex sandpipers, which frequent marshes and pools. The rivers of North Asia are inhabited by many common freshwater fishes and by several kinds of sturgeons, including sterlets. Lake Baikal has a unique aquatic life, including many endemic species of sponges, worms, and crustaceans and the Baikal seal, Ficus iberica. The steppes. The animal life of the steppes differs as much from that of the taiga as from that of the tundra. It includes many burrowing rodents, such as jerboas, marmots, amphibians, and larger mammals, such as numerous antelope. The steppes were the original home of the northern cattle, Bos taurus, the horse, and probably the Bactrian, two-humped, camel. Few, if any, of those remain as truly wild animals. Typical birds are bustards, quails, sand grouse, and the red-legged hobby. Hoopoes and rollers are common locally, and bee-eaters and the common sand martin nest along riverbanks. Waterfowl inhabit the reed beds of the great rivers, as do locusts, which periodically migrate in immense swarms, devastating crops. East and Southwest Asia. The eastern part of the region, consisting of northeastern and eastern China, the Korean Peninsula, and Japan, has several endemic varieties of deer. The Siberian tiger, originally native to southeastern Siberia, northeastern China, and Korea, now survives only in a small region along the border between Russia and China. The endangered giant panda inhabits the mountain forests of south-central China. The lesser, or red, panda, the giant panda's only close relative, is a much smaller Himalayan mammal. Some species of animals are endemic to Japan, including a monkey related to the tailless barbarian macaque of Gibraltar. The Oriental region. Mammals. The greater part of the Oriental region is tropical. The northwestern part is dry and partly desert. so animal life is chiefly confined to the forms related to those of the dry parts of the Ethiopian and Palearctic regions. Elsewhere, monkeys are common. Apes are found only in tropical rainforests. Gibbons inhabit regions of Assam, in northeastern India, Myanmar, peninsular Southeast Asia, and the Greater Sunda Islands, while orangutans are restricted to the islands of Sumatra and Borneo, where they are in danger of extinction. The Asiatic distribution of the African lion is now confined to Gir Forest National Park of the Kathiawar Peninsula in Gujarat state, India, where it is protected, but a few specimens may still occur in southeastern Iran. Tigers are now found from the Himalayas to Sumatra, though their range was once much wider. Leopards range throughout the region, except in Sumatra. Civets and mongooses are numerous. The badger-like rattle lives in the hilly districts of peninsular India and is even to be seen as far west as Israel. Jackals are plentiful in India. The striped hyena is confined to drier parts. Both are absent from the east. Chevrotains, small hornless-like ruminants, are typical, and wild pigs are also widely distributed. Indian one-horned rhinoceroses are protected and confined to Nepal and Assam. Sumatran two-horned rhinoceroses are now restricted to the deep forests of Malaysia, southern Sumatra, and northern Borneo. The one-horned Javan rhinoceros population numbers only a few dozen. Malayan tapirs live in dense forests in southern Myanmar, Malaysia, and Sumatra. Indian elephants are found throughout the region. Scaly anteaters, or pangolins, also found in Africa, are characteristic. The tropical breed of cattle, Bos indicus, known as the Braham or zebu and recognizable by its shoulder humps, was domesticated in India, as was the water buffalo, which is now distributed from Egypt to central China and the Philippines. Birds. Game birds are important. The Indian peacock can be seen throughout India, whereas another species of peacock, Bavo muticus, is restricted to Java. Numerous species of pheasants live in the forests of Myanmar, Thailand, peninsular Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Sumatra, and Borneo. Jungle fowl are unique to the Oriental region and are the source of all domesticated chickens. Pigeons occur in great variety, but the number of species of parrots is small compared with other tropical regions. Water and wood kingfishers are represented by many species. Hornbills show their greatest development in the Oriental region. The Indian hoopoe is common in India but is only a migratory bird in the southeastern part of the region. Among cuckoos, the brain fever bird, an Asian hawk cuckoo that takes its name from the suggested effect of its repetitious cry, is well known. Eagles, osprey, falcons, hawks, kites, and buzzards all occur. In the western part, vultures are numerous and are found even in towns. Reptiles and amphibians. Of the crocodiles, the gavial, which has long slender jaws and a soft inflatable nose tip, is restricted to the large rivers of northern India. A species of an allied genus is found in Sumatra and Borneo, and the mugger, the common freshwater crocodile, and the estuarine crocodile have a wider distribution. Freshwater turtles and land tortoises are well represented. Lizards are numerous, and flying lizards are also typical of the region. Chameleons are chiefly African, but one species is found in peninsular India and Sri Lanka. Snakes are numerous, among them the poisonous kite, cobra, and Russell's viper. Frogs and toads are abundant. Fish. The freshwater fish life of the Oriental region is rich. The carp and catfish families have many native genera and species. The labyrinth fish, so named for a labyrinthine outpocketing of the gill chamber that permits them to take oxygen from air as well as from water, to which the climbing perch and the gourami belong, are characteristic of the fish life of the region, as are spiny eels. Invertebrates. Insects, arachnids, scorpions, spiders, ticks, and mites. Mollusks and other invertebrates inhabit the region in great numbers. Large bird-wing butterflies, allied to the well-represented swallowtails, are typical. Almost all known families of scorpions are present. Among land shells, the absence of Helicidae, a family of land snails that have lungs, common in the Palearctic region, is noteworthy. Their place is taken by other forms, such as species of Hemiplecta, and by land mollusks that have horny or shelly plates on their posterior dorsal surfaces.
Languages. The languages of Asia are richly diverse. The vast majority of the people of continental Asia speak a language in one of three large language families. The first, Altaic, consists of the Turkic, Mongolian, and Manchu-Tungusic subfamilies. The second, Sino-Tibetan, includes the Chinese and Tibeto-Burman languages. Finally, the Indo-European family consists of the Indo-Aryan, Iranian, and Slavic languages, as well as Armenian. The peoples of Peninsular and Insular Asia, however, speak numerous other languages, including those in the Austro-Asiatic, Thai, Hmong-Mien, Yao-Yao, and Dravidian families, as well as Japanese, Korean, a vast number of Austronesian languages, and the unrelated languages lumped together within the Paleo-Siberian areal category. Also spoken on the western bounds of Asia are Arabic and Hebrew, both Afro-Asiatic languages, and the Caucasian languages, consisting of at least two unrelated families. Except for the extensive eastward expansion of Russian, a Slavic language, the pattern of language distribution in Asia has remained relatively stable since the 18th century. However, many of the languages spoken by ethnic groups numbering a few thousand or less have become functionally extinct and exist today, if at all, only in the records of linguists. Those fragile groups cannot long withstand the onslaught of more politically and economically influential languages that often are imposed along with new cultural patterns. Among the dominant languages that have gained speakers is Russian, which remains the primary public language in Siberia and is still important in the Central Asian republics, having been taught to large numbers of non-Slavic inhabitants. Similarly, Mandarin Chinese, now generally called Putonghua, common language, in China, is spoken by more people than any other language in the world, although such regional languages as Wu and Cantonese also retain their vitality. In India, where more than 20 languages are officially recognized, the larger regional languages are not losing ground, despite enormous increases in the Hindi-speaking population. The major languages of northern India, including Hindi, evolved from Sanskrit and are members of the Indo-European language family, while the languages of southern India belong to the Dravidian family and include Tamil and Telugu. More than 10 different scripts are used in India. An Indian banknote has its value written on it in 13 Indian languages and also in English. Hindi and English are the official languages of the Indian central government. The dominance of Hindi has become a political issue in parts of India where it is not the primary language, particularly in the Dravidian-speaking south. The island nations of Southeast Asia, each with hundreds of local languages, have adopted national languages to facilitate communication. Indonesia's official national language is Bahasa Indonesia, but hundreds of local languages and dialects remain in use across the vast archipelago. Javanese, for example, has more than twice as many native speakers as Bahasa Indonesia. The Philippines, which also has hundreds of local languages and dialects, has adopted Filipino, or Filipino, a standardized form of Tagalog, as a national language, although it is the first language of only about 1/4 of the population. English, the language of administration when the Philippines was a U.S. possession, remains in wide use. Both English and Filipino are official languages. Religion. Asia is the birthplace of all the world's major religions and hundreds of minor ones. Like all forms of culture, Asian religions may be considered geographically in terms of both their places of origin and their distribution. South Asia. Hinduism, with a polytheistic and ritual tradition comprising numerous cults and sects, is the oldest of several religions that originated in South Asia. It remains a unifying force of Indian culture and the social caste system, which Hindu tradition sees as a reflection of the relative spiritual purity of reincarnated souls. The religion has had little appeal outside the Indian cultural context. Except on Bali and other Hinduized islands of Indonesia, Hinduism is practiced outside the subcontinent mainly by Indian expatriates. Jainism and Buddhism emerged in reaction to prevailing Hindu practices in the 6th and 5th centuries BCE, respectively. Although Jainism never spread significantly beyond two present-day states of northwestern India, its principles of non-violence and asceticism have deeply influenced Indian thought. Buddhism rose in northeastern India as a universal alternative to hierarchical religion, offering nirvana, or enlightenment, to individuals regardless of culture or social station. In the centuries following its foundation, Buddhism gave rise to two main divergent schools, Theravada, which claimed orthodox adherence to the teachings of the religion's founder, the Buddha, and Mahayana, which held its teachings to be the fullest account of the Buddha's message. The monastically oriented Theravada predominates today in Sri Lanka and mainland Southeast Asia, while the more liberal Mahayana, with its proliferation of philosophical schools and sects, has had an immeasurable impact on the civilizations of China, Korea, and Japan. Vajrayana, or Tantrism, is an esoteric form of Buddhism practiced in the Tibet Autonomous Region of China, Nepal, Bhutan, and Mongolia. In India itself, the once sizable Buddhist population has diminished to a relatively small number of adherents. Sikhism, a monotheistic Indian religion, was founded in the Punjab in the late 15th century CE and has fueled that region's modern demands for independence. The current Indian state of Punjab has a Sikh majority, with the city of Amritsar in that state as the religion's spiritual center. Buddhism rose in northeastern India as a universal alternative to hierarchical religion, offering nirvana, or enlightenment, to individuals regardless of culture or social station. In the centuries following its foundation, Buddhism gave rise to two main divergent schools, Theravada, which claimed orthodox adherence to the teachings of the religion's founder, the Buddha, and Mahayana, which held its teachings to be the fullest account of the Buddha's message. The monastically oriented Theravada predominates today in Sri Lanka and mainland Southeast Asia, while the more liberal Mahayana, with its proliferation of philosophical schools and sects, has had an immeasurable impact on the civilizations of China, Korea, and Japan. Vajrayana, or Tantrism, is an esoteric form of Buddhism practiced in the Tibet Autonomous Region of China, Nepal, Bhutan, and Mongolia. In India itself, the once sizable Buddhist population has diminished to a relatively small number of adherents. Sikhism, a monotheistic Indian religion, was founded in the Punjab in the late 15th century CE and has fueled that region's modern demands for independence. The current Indian state of Punjab has a Sikh majority, with the city of Amritsar in that state as the religion's spiritual center. Southwest Asia. Southwest Asia, the Middle East, is the cradle of three great monotheistic systems, Judaism and its offshoots Christianity and Islam. Judaism, founded in the eastern Mediterranean region some 4,000 years ago, posits a covenant relationship between God, the source of divine law, and humankind. Most Asian Jews now live in Israel, although there are small Jewish communities in various other areas of the continent. In the 20th century, a number of Jewish sects and reform movements found and elsewhere accompanied immigrants to Israel. Christianity, which was derived from Judaism some 2 millennia ago, came to have the largest number of believers among the world's religions. After it was adopted by the Roman and Byzantine empires, Christianity became predominant in Europe and in European-derived cultures. It is practiced by sizable minorities in many Asian countries, notably South Korea, and by Roman Catholic majorities in East Timor and the Philippines. Islam dominates as the state religion of most Southwest Asian countries, and a substantial majority of Muslims live in Asia. From the Arabian Peninsula, where it was founded in the 7th century, Islam spread throughout the Middle East, into Central Asia and parts of South Asia, and across the Bay of Bengal to Malaysia and to Indonesia, which remains predominantly Muslim. The majority of Asian Muslims belong to the Orthodox Sunnite branch, except in Iran and Iraq, where members of the more esoteric Shiite branch are in the majority. Muslims constitute important minority populations in India, the Philippines, and China. Among the other religions that developed in Southwest Asia are Zoroastrianism, an ancient religion that survives in Iran and India and contains both the monotheistic and dualistic elements, and Baha'i, a universalist faith founded in Persia, Iran, in the mid-19th century. East Asia. Ancient Chinese religious and philosophical traditions survive in the form of 2 main schools, Daoism, Taoism, and Confucianism, both of which originated in the 5th or 6th century BCE. The 2 schools differ in orientation, Daoism stressing mystical experience and the individual's harmony with nature, and Confucianism emphasizing the duty of the individual in society and government, but both have profoundly influenced Chinese and Chinese-derived culture. Indigenous Chinese folk religious traditions continue to influence the practice of both Daoism and Confucianism, as well as Buddhism, which has many adherents in China. Confucianism, Daoism, and Buddhism are also widespread in Korea, where indigenous Korean religious traditions remain important as well. Shinto encompasses the indigenous religious beliefs and practices of the Japanese people. Although among some practitioners that tradition has absorbed the influences of other belief systems, such as Confucianism, Daoism, and Buddhism, its fundamental principles linking sacred power, ritual observance, and imperial nationhood remain unique to Japanese culture. Other religions. In addition to the major religions discussed above, numerous localized spiritual practices are found throughout Asia. Animism, for example, is particularly common among some ethnic minorities of South and Southeast Asia. Mystical shamanism remains characteristic of numerous North and Central Asian peoples, and shamanistic cults are also found in South Korea and Japan. Settlement patterns. Ecological factors. Agriculture remains the mainstay of Asia, though the proportion of the population engaged in agriculture is steadily declining. Although marginal lands in many parts of South and East Asia have been brought under cultivation, and many former pastoral ranges in Southwest and Central Asia are now irrigated, the broad ecological factors touched upon above have continued to give rise to geographic variations in population and economic activity. Parts of South and East Asia can support dense populations. Moister regions in the southwest, for example, in Turkey and northern Iran, support large populations. Rural settlement. Population densities have everywhere increased, and the modernization of agriculture, increased mineral exploitation, and industrialization have brought cultural change. Some of the small ethnic groups have been dying out, but larger groups often have accepted change and have increased in numbers. In South and East Asia, growing lowland populations have been pressing hard on the available land as population densities exceed 2,000 persons per square mile, 750 per square kilometer. In Indonesia, government programs have encouraged farmers to relocate from Java, one of the most densely populated places on Earth, to more thinly populated Indonesian islands, where ethnic Javanese have sometimes come into conflict with indigenous peoples. Similarly, in Central Asia, both Chinese and Russian settlement programs have moved peoples from heavily populated regions into frontier zones in order to develop both agricultural and industrial resources. In southern Siberia, the Soviet settlement program spread a thick wedge of European Russians and assorted ethnic minorities eastward to the Pacific Ocean and northward along every river valley to the Arctic Ocean. As a result, many of the Paleo-Siberian ethnic groups have been submerged and absorbed. Old trading posts, oasis towns, and the few old cities of southern Siberia and the Central Asian republics have been developed into modern industrial centers. Those locations have been linked to modern transport systems by which raw materials and manufactured products flow to the European regions. Most new cities have been populated largely by European Russians, with Asian peoples remaining chiefly in the rural areas. The modernization of Southwest Asia, through the renaissance of Turkey and the impact of petroleum exploitation on the Arabian Peninsula, Iraq, and Iran, has altered many of the old patterns of ethnic groupings in those areas. A further alteration of the historic pattern came in 1948 with the creation of the State of Israel, to which large numbers of Jews from North Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and North America have migrated. Urban settlement. More than 2/5 of all Asians live in and around cities and towns, and increasing urbanization is heightening regional contrasts in population density. Israel, Japan, and Singapore are among the most highly urbanized countries in the world, and Asia claims several of the world's largest metropolises. Two basic factors account for that concentration: natural population growth in the cities themselves and large-scale rural-to-urban migration. In many cities, such as Kolkata, Calcutta, Mumbai, Bombay, Bangkok, Jakarta, Manila, and even Shanghai, the ceaseless influx overwhelms the existing capacity to provide jobs, services, and appropriate shelter for new arrivals. The results are squatter settlements and shanty towns that may contain as many as half of the city's people. Such areas typically lack proper water supply, electricity, sanitation, and transportation facilities, although over time the quality of the makeshift dwellings often improves. A distinctive adaptation on a large scale, called the extended metropolis, is emerging in some areas. In such a development, the expanding peripheries of the great cities merge with the surrounding countryside and villages, where a highly commercialized and intensive form of agriculture continues, yet where an increasing portion of the farmer's income is derived from non-farm work. Some decentralization of urban industry occurs, and many new industrial and service jobs become available for the rural population. Movement of goods and people is extensive, if basic, achieved with bicycles, mopeds, carts, trucks, buses, and trains. The quasi-rural environs of urban centers offer to investors and residents alike advantages such as lower land costs, better labor markets, and less congestion and environmental pollution than exist in the cities proper. The extended metropolis model is thus an alternative form of urban growth that helps to divert what might otherwise be an overwhelming flood of migrants to the great cities. Beijing Tianjin, Shanghai Nanjing, Hong Kong Guangzhou, Delhi New Delhi, Mumbai Pune, and Seoul are examples of a form of growth that can lead eventually to the kind of megalopolitan development found in the Tokyo-Yokohama-Osaka-Kobe corridor of Japan. Mineral resources. Coal. Asia has enormous reserves of coal, amounting to nearly 3/5 of the world's total, but they are unevenly distributed. The largest reserves are found in Siberia, the Central Asian republics, India, and especially China. Indonesia, Japan, and North Korea have smaller but nevertheless economically important reserves. China has chiefly high-grade coal reserves. Every province has at least one coal field, but the largest reserves are in Shaanxi in Shaanxi and the Ordos River Basin in the north, Sichuan, Shandong, and the northeast, Fujian and Liaoning Province, are old coal-producing regions with good reserves, and a coal mining area with large deposits has been developed in central Anhui, north of the Yangtze River, Changjiang. Mines in Ningxia and Gansu supply northern industrial plants, but their reserves are not clearly known. The long-known reserves in western PB are being exploited. Enormous coal reserves are found in North and Central Asia, and some 200 fields have been worked throughout the region. Most of the known coal supplies of North Asia lie in Siberia, but the total extent and quality of Siberian deposits have not been fully explored. The Ural Mountains are not rich in coal, but there are some small fields of lower-grade coals. The Kuznets Basin in south-central Siberia has become a giant producer. The Minusинsk Basin in the central region of western Siberia, the Kansk region to the north along the Trans-Siberian Railway, the Tremkovo area west of Lake Baikalin south-central Siberia, and the Beria River Basin in the southeast also are the major areas of Siberian production. Many smaller deposits have been worked to supply local regions, such as the small and scattered fields north of Vladivostok and on Sakhalin Island in the Far East. The Karahandy fields in east-central Kazakhstan contain the largest deposits in Central Asia. During the Soviet period, however, mining was not expanded there after sources of better coals began to be worked in western Siberia. The Ikybastas field, north of the main Karahandy fields, also is a producer of high-quality coal. Smaller deposits also are worked in Uzbekistan, as well as in the valleys of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. The Chinese and Indian economies in particular have depended heavily on coal, and their coal consumption has grown along with their industrial economies since the late 20th century. Concern has been raised by environmentalists about the possibility that increasing coal consumption in these two countries would raise global atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. Petroleum and natural gas. At least two-thirds of the world's known crude oil and natural gas reserves are found in Asia. The proportion may prove higher as Siberia, the Caspian Basin, and the seas of southeastern Asia are further explored. Many of the island chains bordering eastern Asia have geologic formations favoring petroleum accumulation, and oil fields, both on land and offshore, are in production in the Indonesian islands of Sumatra, Java, and Borneo and in China, Brunei, and Malaysia. Western Asia has the largest known oil reserves, located in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Other regions in Southwest Asia have limited amounts of oil, and known petroleum reserves on the Indian subcontinent are small as well. However, significant deposits of natural gas were discovered in Bangladesh during the 1990s. Malaysia is the only important oil-producing area on the mainland of Southeast Asia, although offshore waters may yield production after further exploration. Vietnam also has some offshore potential. The area of the South China Sea has been actively tested, but disputes among the surrounding countries about sovereignty over the Spratly Islands has inhibited development. The Philippines is negligible as a producing region, and the petroleum production of Japan is also small. North and South Korea appear to have virtually no prospects of production, but China has a number of oil-producing fields in the provinces of Sichuan, Gansu, and Xinjiang and in the northeast. The Khitan Basin in northwestern Qinghai Province also is a producing region. Some oil has been derived regularly from oil shales found in the northeast, and natural gas is exploited in Sichuan and in the northeast. Siberia produces more natural gas than Southwest Asia and is a significant oil producer as well. The flanks of the Ural Mountains have a number of large oil fields and small gas fields. The rich gas field in the northern Ob River Basin at Borisovo indicates that the entire Ob Basin may yield natural gas. In the East Dolina River Basin, north of Yakutsk, also contains large gas reserves. Azerbaijan and the former Soviet republics of Central Asia also possess large deposits of oil and natural gas. Much of this is centered in the Caspian Basin, particularly in areas claimed by Azerbaijan. The capital, Baku, has become a new world center for oil exploration. The reserves, which the former Soviet Union hardly noticed, may prove to be substantial. Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan share in Caspian output. Uzbekistan has a major gas field at Gazli in the Kizilkum Desert southeast of the Aral Sea and oil fields in the southeastern part of the country. Although the landlocked region is not as remote as Siberia, its soil and gas producers have debated whether to export production to the world market through Russia or to build pipelines across Iran to the Persian Gulf, across the politically unstable Caucasus region to the Black Sea, or to the Mediterranean ports of Turkey. Uranium. Reserves of uranium ore are found in Asia's ancient crystalline rocks. The richest ore fields are found in Kyrgyzstan, between Osh and Taimuayan. China and India have their own deposits. Chinese uranium resources are thought to be in northern Xinjiang and southern Hunan provinces. Iron. Many regions of Asia have deposits of iron ore, although not every country has its own domestic supply. South Korea, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, and several smaller countries in Southwest Asia appear to have only small iron ore supplies. Japan has far less than is needed by its large iron and steel industry and depends largely on imported supplies. The Philippines exports ore. Malaysia produces a considerable volume. Thailand, Myanmar, and Pakistan have fair amounts of relatively low-grade ores, and Vietnam and Turkey have good ores in substantial volume. Indonesia and India both have large deposits of good iron ores that are reasonably distributed. Although China formerly was regarded as deficient in iron ores, huge quantities of varying grades of ores have been discovered that are widely distributed and often located close to coal supplies. Regional centers of ore mining, smelting, and fabrication are located at Anshan in Liaoning Province, near Beijing, in southern Anhui, west of Shanghai, and central China, east of Wuhan, in southern Inner Mongolia, north of Batu, in central western Gansu, and on Hainan Island, off the southern coast. Large iron ore deposits also occur near Chongqing. Iron ore in small local volumes is widely located in Guizhou and Yunnan in the southwest. China now ranks among the world's major producers of iron ore. Iron ore long has been extracted from the Ural Mountains, and there appears to be a virtually unlimited supply of low-grade ore in the Kostanay Basin east of the southern Urals in northwestern Kazakhstan and southwestern Siberia. Large deposits of medium-grade ore have been found northwest of Lake Baikal, close to the Tremkova coal deposits. Smaller deposits have been located in several locations in eastern Siberia. In Central Asia, the main deposits are found in eastern Kazakhstan. Ferroalloy metals. Asian resources of nickel are not extensive. There is a notable ore field at Norilsk, in north-central Siberia. Indonesia, China, and the Philippines also possess reserves and produce substantial quantities of nickel. Asian countries with reserves of chromium include Turkey, the Philippines, India, Iran, and Pakistan. Reserves are also found in northwestern Kazakhstan. Manganese is found in abundance, with large reserves in Transcaucasia, Central Asia, Siberia, and India. Chinese reserves also are considerable. Southern China has exceptionally large deposits of tungsten. Tungsten reserves in Central Asia also are important, as are those of molybdenum. Non-ferrous base metals. Asia is not richly endowed with copper. In Central Asia, the main sites are Olmalic, southeast of Tashkent, Uzbekistan, Zhezkazgan, west of Karahandy, and Kongirad, on Lake Balkhash, Kazakhstan. In Siberia, production is mainly from the Kuznets Basin. Japan's once widespread copper ore reserves are no longer worked, and the Philippines has limited reserves. China has deposits in Gansu, Hebei, and Hubei, but production is insignificant. Turkey, Myanmar, Malaysia, Mongolia, India, and North Korea have small reserves. Significant reserves of tin exist along a north-south axis running from southwestern China through the Malay Peninsula to Indonesia. Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos, and Yunnan province in China also have deposits of tin. Siberia has substantial reserves in Transbaikal, also in the Sikhotalan Mountains of the Far East. The largest reserves of lead and zinc in Asia are located in the Kuznets Basin of Siberia and in central and eastern Kazakhstan. China also has abundant deposits of zinc and lead ores, and North Korea has important lead resources. Asia has enormous reserves of bauxite. The largest fields are located in Kazakhstan and in south-central Siberia in the Sayan Mountains. There also are large deposits in India, Indonesia, Turkey, and Malaysia, as well as significant reserves in China. Important quantities of mercury occur in south-central China and in Siberia. Magnesite is common in Asia. There are large deposits of antimony in central China. Turkey and Thailand also have substantial reserves. Precious metals. Many Asian countries have produced gold from alluvial stream deposits in past centuries, and some have continued to do so. Small volumes of alluvial gold are produced in Myanmar, Cambodia, and Indonesia, and the headwaters of the Yangtze River in the Tibetan border region yield some gold. India formerly was a large producer of gold from lode mines, but the best ores appear to have been exhausted. North and South Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines have significant gold ore reserves and periodically produce gold from small lode mines. Gold has been produced from Siberian lode mines in the central Ural Mountains for centuries, and in the 19th century there were several gold rushes to work alluvial stream deposits farther east on the Lena and Yenisei rivers. Siberian gold production is now considerable, and lodes are worked in several locations, centering on the upper reaches of the Kolyma River in the northeast. In addition, platinum is mined near Norilsk in the central Siberian Plateau in northern Siberia. Another major lode is in eastern Kazakhstan at Azov, south of Sumy. Non-metallic minerals. Reserves of asbestos are localized. It is abundant in China, in South Korea, and on the eastern slope of the central Urals in Siberia. Mica is abundant in eastern Siberia and is also found in large quantities in India. Asia has vast reserves of rock salt, but the hills and glaciers of salt in southern Iran have not been exploitable. Deposits of sulfur and gypsum are abundant in Central and West Asia. Japan has large reserves of sulfur. Kazakhstan has large deposits of phosphates in the Tabkhara and Peninsula on the eastern shore of the Caspian Sea and other scattered deposits of lesser value. Diamonds are produced in east-central Siberia and in India. India and Sri Lanka are significant producers of rubies, sapphires, and many semi-precious stones, such as moonstones and agates. Myanmar and Cambodia also have important supplies of rubies, sapphires, and other gems. Water resources. Asia's water resources constitute a vast potential, both for generating hydroelectricity and for irrigating crops. Water is important for irrigation in many Asian regions that are either arid, as in much of Central and Southwest Asia, subject to long dry seasons because of pronounced monsoonal, seasonal variation in rainfall, as in much of South and Southeast Asia, or subject to seasonal high water and floods, for example, from the spring snowmelt in Siberia, the Himalayas, and the mountains of Central Asia. Other regions, such as Indonesia, are particularly susceptible to longer-term climate variation, such as that caused by the El Niño phenomenon. The management of water has been a prime focus of Asian people since the earliest civilizations were established on the continent. Perhaps the most graphic expression of this is the Islamic tradition of building a garden in the desert, complete with splashing fountains. As ever larger dams have been built, however, resistance has increased from opponents concerned with the environmental and social harm that such dams can cause. Siberian rivers have an excellent hydroelectric potential, for when dammed they provide low falls with an enormous flow volume. However, the extreme cold temperatures of winter freeze lakes and streams and keep water levels low for much of the year, which hinders exploitation. The Far East, with its abundant precipitation and great differences in water level, has an immense generating potential, although the remoteness of eastern Siberia has discouraged industrialization. East Asia's water power potential varies by region. Japan, a mountainous country whose short rivers have steep drops but relatively small volumes of water flow, has already harnessed much of its hydroelectric potential. Generating capacity, however, is increased by heavy rains, particularly in summer. The water power potential of northern China is extremely limited because the flow of the Huanghe and other northern rivers is erratic and because these rivers carry heavy volumes of silt. The hydroelectric potential of China south of the Qin Mountains, however, is great. The Yangtze River has considerable water power potential. The Three Gorges Dam project on the central Yangtze near Yichang, construction of which officially began in 1994 and was largely completed in 2006, has been the largest and most ambitious attempt to harness this potential. The dam created a vast reservoir and locks that facilitate ship transport upstream and is intended to control the river's periodic flooding. The dam also has the capacity to generate 22,500 megawatts of hydroelectricity. However, the project attracted considerable controversy. Flooding the river basin submerged numerous cities, towns, and villages and several sites of archaeological and cultural interest, and it necessitated resettling more than 1 million people in a region with a shortage of available land. The hydroelectric and irrigation potential in South Asia also varies by region. In Pakistan, nearly all agriculture depends on the Indus River and its tributaries in the Punjab, and the waters of the Indus Basin are highly regulated, with numerous barrages and canals providing water for irrigation. The Western Ghats, which slope down abruptly to the western maritime plains, would theoretically allow dams to harness water flowing down the steep slope. However, the rivulets that rise on the summit have an insignificant volume of flow in winter. Rivers on the eastern slope of the Deccan Plateau, such as the Mahanadi and the Godavari, lend themselves to the construction of low dams with great volumes of flow, as also do the Himalayan rivers entering the Gangetic Plain. Nearly all of the highly seasonal rivers of peninsular India have been dammed. One exception was the Narmada River, where work began in the 1990s on the first in a series of 30 large dams. Construction of these dams has been vigorously opposed by environmentalists both within India and internationally. The Himalayan ranges represent one of the world's greatest water towers, with rich possibilities for utilizing steep drops for generating hydroelectricity. During the summer monsoon, the heaviest precipitation on Earth falls there on the highest mountains. Nepal has a vast theoretical hydroelectric potential. Environmentalists worry that earthquakes in this seismically active region could cause the dams to fail. Some also argue that large dams might themselves instigate earthquakes, because the weight of the water in reservoirs could press on faults in the mountains and because water under pressure lubricates faults. Engineers, however, believe that they can address these problems. An obstacle to such development is the fact that the Ganges-Ganga-Brahmaputra basin spans 5 countries: China, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. Power, irrigation water, and flood control would benefit India and Bangladesh most, but the sites of the projects would be mostly in Nepal and Bhutan. In Southeast Asia, the Mekong passes through 6 countries. Again, development has been stalled by regional political difficulties. In arid West Asia, water politics are highly serious, as shown by the tensions among Syria, Israel, and Jordan over the use of the Jordan River. Another dispute, between Iraq and Syria on the one hand and upstream Turkey on the other, concerns the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, whose headwaters lie in Turkey. Turkey had already built several dams, including the Ataturk Dam, on the 2 rivers, and construction has been underway on 2 more dams on the Euphrates, at Bayrus and Kargams, since the 1990s. Iraq and Syria have objected strongly to both projects, because they feared that the water supply would be reduced, that they would not be able to control water flow timing, and that the quality of water would be diminished. Concern was also raised that water issues might give rise to future armed conflicts within the region.